All right, guys, welcome to another episode of War HOGG Words of Wisdom. For those of you that aren't aware, kind of when we started this first thing, War Dog Duco was with me, but he still is in essence. I lost him July 5th, 2001 to cancer. But for my viewers out there, you can see there's his moose that mama got him. So in essence, he's still here with us. Really, guys, on this episode of War HOGG Words of Wisdom, just raw, unedited, I want to talk about law enforcement firearms training. So me and Mark had the privilege, and I say the privilege because, again, these men and women that are out there every day serving their communities, man, they got a difficult job. And whenever we have the opportunity to give back to them, there's nothing better. So we had the privilege of running another law enforcement firearms training course. Big shout out and thanks to Vertex and Flying Cross, because it would not have been possible without those guys. But again, a couple things, each of these classes, something kind of slaps you in the face. And for me, it's one of these that here we have our law enforcement officers out there, and they typically go through their academy, get their firearms training, and then all they're doing afterwards, their quote unquote department training, if you want to say, is their quals. Well, that's basically testing them. The problem that I kind of ran into was, I asked these guys kind of, first thing in the morning, hey man, do you guys have a training notebook? Do you have a training logbook? Are you doing dry fire training? And the answer was no. And I'm sitting there going, guys, check it out. If you're in law enforcement, if you're carrying a firearm for self-defense, you've got to have some type of training plan for what you're doing. And there's nothing, in my opinion, that's easier than doing dry fire training. If you're not sure, hey, what does this dry fire training look like? How do I set it up? Man, easiest thing is just go to my YouTube channel, War HOGG Tactical, and there's plenty of segments in there on setting up dry fire training. But really, guys, there's got to be something concurrent that goes on. It's just not just because you have a firearm in your holster or you're carrying a gun does not mean you have the skill, the efficiency to use that firearm effectively to save your life or save somebody else's life. So there's nothing more, I guess, better, for lack of better terms, than passing on a skill set to these guys that, God forbid, I hope they never have to do, never have to use. But if they do, they've got the skill to go ahead and defend themselves. Now, I think it's important that a lot of people understand, because some people don't know the backside of War HOGG Tactical, some do. But really, my whole passion for firearms training and teaching others stemmed all the way back in 2002. So prior to 9/11, I was actually teaching for the Special Forces Advanced Urban Combat Committee. And we didn't know that we were training for war in essence. So if you want to think back then, I was teaching theory. Hey, man, this is what I think works. Yeah, I'd gone to Desert Storm, but wasn't really prolonged gunfights, not like the GWAT is today. So long story short, training these guys, in essence, theory. The first group of guys from 7th Special Forces Group that came back from Afghanistan and said, hey, man, that stuff you taught me saved my life. That was the game changer. That's what set War HOGG Tactical in motion. And the thing is, when we're out there teaching our law enforcement officers, we're teaching from experience, not theory. I see a lot of habits, for lack of better terms, with these guys that are either theory or that are, in my opinion, driven from generations of firearms training that's never really evolved. And again, I'm not busting the firearms trainers out there in the law enforcement community. I'm not. I'm just saying we've got to evolve. We've got to get things up to a current day situation. So a couple prime examples. I am not a super big fan of the slingshot, basically your hand coming over the top to manipulate the slide. One of the big firearms arguments will be, well, you do that because in a high stress situation, you're not going to find that little button on the slide release. So, okay. Shockingly, I've got to hit that little button on the magazine release. I can do that, but I can't hit this other piece of metal object that's sticking out from my firearm. Okay. Scratch your head on that one. Because again, for me, I'm teaching the guys to use their left hand, because regardless, it doesn't matter what firearm they pick up, they can use that left thumb to release that side release. And oh, by the way, you can actually practice that dry fire. You can't practice the slingshot unless you've got dummy rounds in order to cycle that firearm through. And it was funny because one of the students out there, uh, last week, he was originally a slingshotter, stuck an empty magazine in, couldn't slingshot, and then what did he do? He defaulted back to using his support thumb to let the slide go forward. So it's little things like that. The hand up in front of the chest. I sit there and go, all right, what's the purpose of us having to use one-handed shooting? Because we do that with our law enforcement classes, even with our civilian classes. And to me, it's I'm probably going to either my pocket, my belt somewhere, because that's where my flashlight is. Because in my opinion, that's probably the primary reason why you'd end up shooting one-handed. Granted, a lot of people say, well, what if I get shot? Well, okay, that's fine. But really, to me, it's what am I doing with that hand? And again, when you look at the aspect as I know it, it was taught years ago, put your hand in front of your chest prior to the whole body armor thing to give your body a little more protection. Okay, well, we've got body armor nowadays, so it doesn't really make sense to me. Go to that pocket belt, wherever that auxiliary light source is, because that's probably what you're looking to need or looking to go to. Um, we put t-shirts on paper targets to add realism, preferably dark ones, because then guys can't see their holes. And we have a whole teaching point on that. This class here, very heavy on the red dot, which I'd love to see red dots in my law enforcement classes, man. I think that's fantastic. However, you ask the question, and I know the answer, and I'm not going to give it up because I want these guys to think and do some homework. What happens when you put that red dot on a red shirt? What color red shirt? So there's just, I need them to think. If I just give them the information, then it's easy, and they're not going to go ahead and, I guess, in my opinion, kind of push themselves, train harder, whatever the case may be. So when it comes to my LE guys, I kind of challenge all of my law enforcement across the board. Number one, I say this, excuse me. I said, if you can do nothing else, spare 15 minutes a week, 15 minutes. So 3 times a week, 5 minutes a day, just have a plan for what your dry fire training is going to be. Is it going to be draw from the holster? Is it presentation? Is it magazine changes? You have to figure out what your routine is. And then, oh, by the way, at some point, start introducing a pro timer in there, because that's really the only way to understand, hey, am I getting efficient with what I'm doing? Is my times coming down? Are my movements good? Set your phone up to record yourself. Take a look at yourself. Hey, am I putting added movement in there? Am I being as efficient as I can with whatever drill I'm looking to do? And again, with my LE guys, they've got some, it's easy to teach, let's say, a speed magazine change when you've got, an open magazine that's easy to access. What if I've got to deal with the flap? What if my department says, hey, they've got to be over on the holster side? What if they're in a horizontal versus a vertical position? All these things you've got to deal with. But again, that's fine. It's dealing with it and figuring out what is the best technique and way to practice that. I'd be amiss if I'm covering firearms training, especially for my LE guys, and I'm saying, at the same token, are you guys training your hands? Because to me, that's another big point that's greatly missed. Is we rely on this bat utility belt, for lack of better terms, for our tools, but how many times is our hands ever trained, and are we training our hands? I'm not going to downplay, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Trust me, I practice it, I train it, but that would not be my primary focus. If I was a law enforcement officer, I'd look at what is my hand skills, my striking skills. Look at something from the Muay Thai type side, because hey, if someone is close, am I going to clinch them? Can I use my knees? Look at the whole thing, because again, the argument always comes in, and when people argue, you got to sit there and go, all right, let's think about it for a second. All fights go to the ground. I would say, sure, when whoever you're fighting or opponent goes to the ground. I don't want to go to the ground. That's not what I want to do. So if I've got stand-up skills, I'll use those first. I'm not saying don't practice jujitsu, because again, it can get you out of a pinch, but that would not be my primary combatives hand-to-hand source, if that makes sense. You want to be well-rounded. It's no different with your firearms training. Let's say, for example, you do have the opportunity to either carry a shotgun, rifle, whatever the case may be. Are you actually training with that? So don't always rely on, hey, am I just doing handgun firearms training? Am I doing whatever other platforms I have available? So I just think it's important, guys, if you are a law enforcement officer, what is your plan for your dry fire training? What is your plan for your enhancement training? I know, for example, there are some departments out there, and say what you want, but they allow their officers 50 bullets a month for their practice ammo. And guys are going to go, 50 rounds. What can you do with 50 rounds? You can do a lot with 50 rounds if you have a plan for what you're doing. But unfortunately, most guys are going to sit there. You figure, hey, they're running 15 round mags. I jam 3 mags. That leaves me 5 rounds left over. I'm just going to go shoot some bullets to shoot some bullets. Have a plan. What am I doing? So again, if I've worked, let's say, for example, in my dry fire training, draw from the holster. Maybe I sit there and take 10 of those rounds and go, all right, I want to practice single shot draw from the holster just to see what my time efficiency, marksmanship, and how well am I mitigating that recoil. Boom. There's 10 rounds there. Always a big fan of B8 bulls. Again, depending on your skill level, I'd like to sit there and say, hey, go back to 25. But if it's not there, there's nothing wrong with shooting them at 15. Find that point where, hey, cool, I'm sitting there consistently banging out high 90s at 15, bump it back to 20, bump back 25. Maybe you start at 25 and go, man, I got one hit on the target. I need to readjust 100%. But again, it's giving you tangibles. Are you working that strong hand? Are you working that support hand? Are you doing anything physical duress? So one thing with the classes that me and Mark are doing, the way we culminate the day is we basically have 2 physical duress events. The thing is, it's just not ramping the heart rate and shooting. It's ramping the heart rate shooting, ramping the heart rate again and shooting, ramping the heart rate one more time and shooting. Because again, if you look at these officers out there, they might wind up, hey, at a gunfight here, have to do a foot pursuit to a suspect, potentially another gunfight ensues, so it's always keeping that physical duress going. It's just not a one-shot deal and you're done, because unfortunately gunfights don't always wind up that way. So really, guys, I just want to use this War HOGG Words of Wisdom. Yes, it's targeted to my law enforcement officers 100%. However, my civilians that are out there listening, you guys can do the same thing, and you should be doing the same thing. Especially if you're a concealed carry holder, make sure that you are practicing your firearms training. So for me, I take it a step further. And if you guys forget, warhogg.com is the easiest thing to go. But the gunpowder target that evic.com sells, you can go to my site and just hit the button. It'll take you right there to the target. I use that all the time. So I can use that in conjunction with, if you want to say outside the waistband, concealed carry. Oh, by the way, I've got one of those punching bobs in the garage as well. So I can do some striking, draw from concealment, engage this target. So again, it's adding as much realism potentially that I might be in, so that I am just to the max trained that I can be. So don't just sit there and go, man, I got it. I qualled, whatever that qual means. Qual is testing. It doesn't really, in my opinion, the law enforcement qualification, it's just to check the block for the department. It's really not enhancing that officer skill. Are you doing force on force training? I mean, we can go down this road. There's all kinds of rabbit holes. Even your patrol officer, how skilled are you in clearing a room? When am I going to have to do that? I don't know. You sit there on a burglar call, and here's one. The canine officer shows up that, oh, you've never worked with before. How do you guys mesh? How do you mesh with that canine handler? All these different things. And trust me, guys, I am not busting law enforcement at all. I've got the utmost respect for what you guys are doing. You guys are in a very difficult position. However, are you putting the time in to ensure that you guys are as skilled as you can? And, God forbid you're in that deadly force encounter, you've got the skill set to end that fight and come home. The last thing I'm going to leave this note on. So when you're looking at the 4 rules of firearm safety, treat all weapons as if they were loaded. Yep, I totally agree. However, I like to add, know the status of your firearm. Guys, if you're carrying a gun for a living and you load that firearm and you're not physically checking that chamber to make sure there's a round in the chamber, and then, oh, by the way, subsequently make sure that magazine is seated, shame on you. And I'm not trying to bust you to throw you under the bus, but again, my LE guys, you do not like to look. You just take for granted that, hey, this thing's loaded and it's good to go. Nope. It's the cheapest insurance policy that you can get. Doesn't take you 2 seconds. I dub it the War HOGG check just to make sure, hey, I've got a round in the chamber. I do it every single time. Every single demo I do, I go through War HOGG administrative load because of the whole process with that. And again, you can go to YouTube and check out all those videos on how to do that. But that War HOGG check, man, cheapest life insurance policy you got, and you know for a fact my firearm is loaded. And then if it were me, and I get it, on the range, we don't really do it, but even for my pistol I'm carrying concealed, I've got 16 rounds. So there's one in the chamber, and that 15-round magazine is fully topped off. So if you want to say I've got that Barney Fife bullet that I can load up in there. So again, guys, just, quick recap. Law enforcement officers, please get out there, train beyond what your department's giving you. If you're not sure what to do, go to YouTube, hit the dry fire training segments. We got a couple different ones in there. Figure out a plan for what is your actual dry fire regiment. Just 5 minutes a day, 3 days a week. Trust me, you guys will be exponentially better and add to your survivability. And again, as always, guys, just want to kind of end either words of wisdom on the Range podcast, whatever we're doing, just something to remember, Duco. And it's funny because I'll go back to the moose, and again, my listeners can't see it, but my viewers can. This crazy moose is actually the big size, and the story behind this guy was, unbeknownst to me, my wife used to like to do things for Duke, and one of them was get him toys. And for whatever reason, this stupid, silly moose, it's got a little squeaker in there. It's kind of blown out a little bit. It didn't so much hit the squeakers, but the texture, feeling, whatever, of this crazy moose, man, was absolutely one of his favorite toys. So, and that was all because of Mama. She went out, I think, got him a small one to start, and then he loved that thing. And she's like, well, let's get him the big one. So Duke and the Moose, man, it's just one of those deals. Miss that guy every day. If you guys haven't gone to Explosive Apparel Design, you got the whole Blackbeard and Friend Duco series. Buddy Paul up at Teutonic Distillery, in honor of Duco. Double barrel maple bourbon is absolutely fantastic. Don't get freaked out about the maple. It's not too sweet. Shannon ended up doing the memorial workout for Duco, so just there's been amazing support across the board for Duke, and I can't thank you guys enough for that. He'll always be there in the words of wisdom, as you can kind of see for the viewers, the picture, that's our very first one, man. So I just want to keep his memory alive. But anyway, guys, I will close on this. Have a training plan. Make sure you guys are training, both your firearms, your hands, physical, and, train hard, stay safe, use these techniques, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode of Words of Wisdom. God bless you. God bless your family. God bless our troops. And God bless the United States of America. War HOGG out.